you, isn't it? We got. I think we're ready to get going, and I think this will be interesting at every stage, to be honest. So I just want to say hello to everyone out there, and make sure that if there's anything you want us to slow down on or to explain a bit further, like put it in the chat, or anything that you want to touch on. I mentioned it earlier when not everyone was here, but like any gaps in your knowledge. I know I'm thinking of things I really wish I knew more about. Put it in there so when it comes to that stage and we can cover it. So just to explain, this is my good friend Jack, who does lots of mixing and mastering, and he's going to go through another artist's song, which I think is a really important thing to do, not your own as well, and try and make it sound as amazing as possible. So we're going to do the whole process pretty quickly. About an hour, is that right, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's ultra quick, but you know, that's going to be, I just want to show you my kind of process. It won't be the final thing at the end, but give you an idea of kind of how I approach things.
That's really interesting. So Jack, take it away. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit further?
Absolutely. Hi guys, my name's Jack Rowley. I'm a sound engineer. I've been working in and around London studios for the past 12 years. I kind of predominantly work within the TV industry, where I do a lot of composition, mixing for TV stuff, sound design. I do voiceovers as well. But I also do a lot of mixing and mastering for music. I always have, and you know, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So yeah, there's a few things I kind of want to go over just before we get into it. I know some of you guys might have heard this as well, but we're going to be looking at a client of mine's track. So this is actually a track that someone sent to me. I'm just going to make sure I share my screen. Hold on. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see that now. Tom, are you seeing that just as a check?
Yeah, it's all good.
And also, just before we continue, I'm just making sure that there's not more people waiting to come in. Is anyone else able to see if there's people waiting to come in on the chat as we move along, or?
I presume Greg can see this.
Okay, cool. Ah, there you go. I've seen someone coming in. Okay, Sammy's coming in. There we go. I've got a little eye on it here, but just in case I missed something, if anyone needs to let me know about people coming in, that'd be great.
And just to be clear as well, Jack, obviously you're doing this in Logic, but these methods apply to all DAWs, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the DAW is kind of, you know, it doesn't really matter what you're using. They all have different things and different capabilities, and I'll go into that, especially with regards to plugins and such. But yeah, but you know, I use Logic, but I know, you know, people use all sorts of things, so it doesn't really matter. The fundamentals are the same. So okay, well, hopefully you guys are kind of seeing this up here now. And this here, as you can see, is how it's come across to me. Now, before I go into it, I was mentioning this before, when I work with clients, I'll always kind of request a few things from them to kind of help me achieve what it is they want from their track. And the first one being is a reference track. You know, I want them to send something over that they've heard or they like, and, you know, even a previous track of theirs that they want this track to sound like. And that is important, because when you come to mixing and mastering, you're going to be in a room that could be different every time. And listening to that track over and over will just give your, you know, calibrate your ears to really hear that sound. And obviously there's so many things in there, where the level of the snare, the level of the kicks, but it's a really good way. So I'd always kind of request that. I'd also always say to the client to kind of, when they're, I'm just going to admit someone, there we go. So when they send the stuff over, I'd always ask for that track to be stripped down completely. So you can see here, he's sent really detailed, you know, tidy stems, which is exactly what I want. So you've got the kick, the 808, the hat, clap, snare, etc. And what I was saying earlier is that sometimes you get it sent across and it will be just a drum track. So you have the kick, the hat, the snare, and all the rest of it. And, you know, it's going to be very difficult to work with that. You can, but of course it's going to limit you further. So always speak to them and try and if you're going to be sending your mixes off to somebody else, make sure that you kind of do as detailed as possible. The other one as well is I'd always kind of make sure that if they've got any sort of compression on there, it's fine to have compression at that level, but just make sure it's not squashed. You know, even this one's a little bit too loud for my liking. But you can see, especially from the sample here, there's some nice dynamic ranges in there. That's not kind of a brick wall. And I would go back, if this was to come through to me and it was a kind of brick wall, overly compressed and squashed, I would go back and say, can you resend that, take the compression off or take it down, and try and get it as with much headroom as possible, because the more headroom I have, the kind of more I can work with that track. If it's going to come through completely squashed, there's only so much I can do with it. So, you know, this is a little bit on the loud side, but, you know, I'm kind of happy with that. And it looks tidy, it looks clean. And he's given me, you know, a bit of information with it. He said he wants the kick to really bang. He wants the 808 to really bang. And, you know, especially with trap, which this track is, you really do have to push things further than you would in other genres, because you've got to get that stuff loud. And the problem is, you know, you've got to push that kick and that bass, but you don't want the rest of the track to suffer. So it's a real kind of balancing act, but we'll go into that completely. Yeah, before we go on, you know, there isn't really a right or wrong to a lot of this as well. I think, you know, I've met a lot of engineers over the past that are very kind of almost scientific with it. You know, they're very mathematical. They know the kind of numbers and they know every plugin they have down to a science, and that's fine. That's kind of their way of doing it. They approach it that way. But I'm more of an intuitive sort of mixer and master. So I really just go off of the sounds. And I think that's important to know, because some people get very bogged down in trying to master every part of every single element of a plugin. And it's, you know, you've got to use your ears essentially at the end of the day. They say kind of mix with your ears, not your eyes. And that's something that I take forward. So yeah, I would always kind of say, just, you know, practice by listening to things, really play with the plugins you have, like really push them to the extremes to see where you go with certain sounds. And just play around. That's exactly where it comes from. Just, you know, listening to the tracks. When you put that track out onto, you know, whatever format it is, that, you know, the listeners are only hearing that track as a stereo track. They're not seeing all the numbers and the plugins that went into making it what it was. So trust your ears, basically. But yeah, enough waffle. Let's kind of get into this. So as you can see, this is how I've got it imported. Let me just take that off. So these don't have any plugins at all at the moment. And what I'm going to do is just play that reference track. So let's just have a listen to that. I won't listen to it over and over, but let's just see how that's sounding. Kind of hear from that track that, you know, tell me if it's too loud, by the way, or too quiet. I can kind of boost the levels this end, but you can kind of hear, again, like I say, I would listen to that track a lot more and really kind of get my ears calibrated to it. But you can hear this is actually one of the masters I've done for him before, so it's a good sign. He was happy with what I did. He wants it sounding like that, so that's cool. But you can really hear that the kick is very dominant. The bass, the 808 is very dominant, but everything else is very clean and clear, and he wants that space within there. So let's try and achieve that with this track. I'm just going to play what he sent untouched as it is. Let's have a listen. Okay, so I won't play all of it, but, you know, again, I would listen through it, and it's sounding like a decent mix. You know, he's got some good levels there. The balance is pretty good, and that always helps. You know, it's just going to make my life a lot easier. But there's a few things straight off the bat I can hear, that a few frequencies that are going to hurt the ears, especially when this gets pushed. The first thing is that you can see around here, it's really loud. So what I'm going to do is just highlight all of that and just take that down by 10 dB, just to give myself a bit of headroom. Otherwise, if I keep pushing it, it's just going to start clipping and sound awful. So that's going to give me the headroom I need straight away. Now I've kind of got a chain here of how I'm going to be working. I'm just going to mute the things I don't need. I really want to, like I say, get into each element of this and hear where maybe some of those annoying frequencies are coming from. So let's have a look at the sample first. I've just got a loop here because, as you heard as well, there's two sections to this sample. So it's kind of got a bit here, which is more kind of vocal led. And then here is quite piano heavy. And I definitely noticed some of the piano notes being quite dominant. But let's have a listen. Okay, so this plugin as well, we'll talk about plugins. You know, a lot of the DAWs, well, all the DAWs have really good plugins. Logic has some great ones, you know, that are standard with it. They really are good. And you can achieve everything that we're going to be doing. But there's a few that I would definitely recommend that if you can kind of, you know, get eventually along the line. These ones that I've just found along, you know, I'm not one of those plugin fiends that has every single plugin going. I just get the ones that I find are really helpful and really useful. This being one of them. This is the FabFilter Pro Q3. It's just a very, very good EQ, very detailed. You can really get in there. And, you know I said about not mixing with your eyes, but it does give you a very good visual representation as well. So let's just have a listen to that again and just kind of look where the sound waves are. You can kind of see there's some here that I'm just going to bring down because they're really poking out. The other good thing with this plugin as well is you can solo the frequency and what you've taken away from it. You might not be able to hear this through the Zoom audio, but let's see. So that sounds horrible to me. You know, of course, it's part of it. Of course, when you do that, you could do that across all the range and it might sound horrible, but it just really sticks out to me. So let's have another look. This one here as well. I'm going to take that down, make that a bit sharper. I mean, it's just generally around here. You could afford to kind of just take it all out, but I think there's just a few that are sticking out. Now, this is the piano section. I'll bring that down. It's really up there. Let's bring that down further. Just bring it on that piano again. So I'm just getting rid of some of these notes that are just poking out a little bit too much for my liking. And again, you can always come back and take these out. But at the moment, I'm just going to take a bit of the raspiness down as well. And also, what I'm noticing here is a lot of this low end kind of sludge that is definitely going to be taking up a lot of room later down the line. So I'm going to just completely lose this. Now, there is some low end in there that he might like, and that's fair enough. But I could see he had a sub bass on there and an 808, and I'm thinking he doesn't actually want the sludge there. So I'm just going to get rid of that. It's quite a heavy low cut, but let's have a listen. So you can't really hear too much there, which is a good sign. But when it gets into the next section, you'll hear that there is some low end. So I don't want to lose too much. I'm going too far now, but just to give you an idea, I hope you guys can hear that. But it's quite heavy. It's quite a lot there, and I just don't think you need it. Again, you know, he may well say that he wants that back in, and that happens all the time. You know, if you're mixing for other people, they say, "Oh, you've really stripped too much out there. I want a bit more warmth in there." But I've worked with him for a long time, so I kind of know what he's going for. But you know, at the moment, that's in quite a good place. I'm quite happy with the sample. I think that's got rid of those kind of frequencies I wanted to lose. So let's carry that on, and let's go for the pad next. So again, get your EQ. So this is kind of doing what it should, in the sense that, you know, it's a very heavy mid-range. I'm just going to bring some of these down a little bit because it just maybe a little bit too dominant or just a little too much. Again, let me solo that. You know, you're going to want those sounds, so you don't want to kind of go too crazy, but this, I think he's got some saturation on here as well. You know, this is being a little bit anal, but I'm just going to get rid of some of that as well. Again, you won't even hear much of that or any of it. And you've got to be careful because sometimes, again, it's a stylistic thing. They might want that sort of saturation in there, but a lot of compressors kind of put the saturation on there. And I think he's going for a clean sound. He's going to want less of that, you know. Low end wise, it's doing fine. I think if I start taking that away, it will take a bit of the character away. So I'm kind of happy with that. Let's have a look at the vocal. So same again. Get the EQ. Okay, let's see what this is doing. So, you know, that's where you'd expect it to be. I'm just going to bring it down ever so slightly because that might poke out. And the thing with higher frequencies as well, there's a lot of temptation to really push them because you want that real snap, that real clarity. But you can do that later down the line as well. So I would always, when you're going into kind of individual stems like this and EQing this way, I would be very careful with how far you push, you know, how far you're pushing the kind of high end. I fell into that trap early on when I was mixing and mastering because I just loved that clear sound. But then suddenly you're hearing it on other things and it was so tinny and raspy, and you've just got to be very, very careful of that. So let's just have another look at that. So again, he's got that saturation at the top. I'm just going to lose a bit of that. Don't want to lose the character though. So I want that in there. So yeah, again, I'm really kind of going into it. There's some kind of wasted low ends down there, taking up needless room, very little, but I'm just going to take it out anyway. Okay, cool. I'm kind of happy with that. So let's have a look at the sub bass that he's got. Okay, let's get the EQ on here as well. So that's really kind of doing exactly what I'd expect it to do. Again, it's got that kind of saturation at the top. I am going to lose that. Let's just turn that to 30 dB. Okay, make that nice and steep. Okay. Yeah, again, he's using obviously kind of stock sounds for this. So, you know, that's exactly how I would expect it to be for sure. So, okay, I'm kind of happy with that. I think it's a little bit lightweight. So I'm at this stage, I'm gonna add a little bit of kind of overdrive. Now, again, the ones built in with Logic, if you use Logic, they're really good. The bit crushers, the distortion, the overdrive especially, they're brilliant. They're really good. There's one that I use, which is called Sausage Fattener, which, to be honest, just for the appearance alone is worth purchasing. Because look at that, the more you turn it up, the more angry it gets. And that's exactly what you want from an overdrive. So let's listen to what that does. Now you can really push it. And, you know, that, to be fair, some people want that sound. They want it to sound, you know, quite clearly and intentionally distorted. He's not going for that, I'd imagine, because he didn't apply that at his mix stage. So I'm just going to take that down, but just to show you the kind of levels it can go to. Okay, that's giving it a bit more meat on the bone. So I'm kind of happy with that. Now let's have a look at the kick, because obviously this is really fundamental. Now he's probably going to have used, again, a programmed kick. So I'm kind of at an advantage in the sense that these are all pre-EQ'd and all the rest of it. You know, he may well have added some bits and bobs, but let's just EQ it and see what it's doing. Again, it's got quite a lot of mid-range to it, which I think is what he wants. He wants that almost distorted sound to it. It's an intentional one. It's very hard, and kicks is really hard to work out how much of that you want in there, because sometimes it just sounds like you've pushed it too far and it's clipping and it doesn't sound good. But it's a, you know, especially with this sort of genre, that, you know, you're going to hear that a lot. But that's, again, it's doing what I would kind of expect it to do. I don't think I need to take anything off of that. There's not too much kind of mud around here, so I'm kind of happy with that. Now, the only thing I want to note at this stage is where that's kind of coming in big, and that's at around 64. So the reason I say that is that now we're going to go and have a look at the 808, and they really do have to sit together and live in harmony. And the reason I kind of made a note of that as well is because you have to make space, really, if you can, make space within the 808 for the kick to really live in there and sit with it. Now, this is quite specific. Again, you know, me and Tom spoke about this before, but what I'm teaching, I know this is a track, but a lot of this stuff can be applied definitely to all genres of music. So it's about learning to find the room and the dynamics and where all of these elements can live together. But let's have a listen to the 808. Okay, so again, get the EQ up, see what it's doing. It's, yeah, again, it's kind of exactly what I think. And it sounds nice, you know, he's obviously put some stuff on there. He's probably put a bit of distortion or overdrive on that. And, you know, it's sounding really nice. He's got it to a nice level. It's not, you know, a lot of the time you get an 808 through and it's just skyrocketing round here and you really have to bring it down. But he's got an understanding that you can't just put tons of low end and hope that it comes out well, because it won't. You know, if you've just got tons of low end around here, it's going to dwarf the rest of the stems and really take up a lot of valuable room. So let's just have a listen again. I'm just going to see if there's anything worth taking off the top, because obviously it has got quite a lot of high end in there, but let's just have a look. I'm just going to solo that. So you don't want to lose around there because that's part of the character. I mean, to be fair, you don't have to lose anything, but I'm just going to take a little bit like that. And then what we want to do is find that 64 hertz, because that's where the kick was. And let's just create a little bit of room for it. So that's going to be about right. Now, of course, this is going to affect the sound because you can see that that is very present in those frequencies. So I'm just going to make that nice and tight, but let's have a listen. So it's gonna be having an effect on it, but that's okay. You know, I think once the kick is in there with it, it will make more sense. Now, I think you can actually afford to boost a little bit more mid on here, because I think that is what he's going for. And, you know, especially with tracks like this, you can trick the ear by using the kind of low mids to really sound like they're actually supplying more low end than they are. And this is important because obviously a lot of formats that people listen to these tracks on, you'll be listening to on phones, on TVs, and you know, laptops, so speakers that don't have that low end capability, but you still want to hear that bass line. You want that 808 to really shine through. So the low to the mids are such an important range, and I don't think he's kind of pushed that enough. So I'm going to put that on there, and then just have a listen through. I mean, it's too much up there, but you know, that's what we want. We want to just work out whereabouts we want it. And that's it. This is using your ears to feel where you really like that 808 to sit. And at this stage, just so I'm going to not take up too much room, I'm going to put a limiter on this now. Now, again, when we talk about plugins, and this is another one that I really do recommend. It's FabFilter again, which make fantastic plugins, but this is the Pro L, and it's an incredible limiter. I've used plenty in my time, and none have come better than this. And what it allows you to do is just push stuff way further than you actually think you can, without it sounding overly squashed. Now, there will be some squashing going on, but let's have a look. So I'm going to push this up. See, that's reducing heavily, but it's sounding nice to me, and it's obviously taking off that real sharp on the attack. But remember, the kick is going to be thudding in that spot as well. But I think that's sounding nice. Let's bring the kick back in, and what I'm going to do is add a limiter to the kick as well. and let's see kind of how they're living together at this stage. Because, you know, I'm focusing on this section because that's what you wanted me to look at. So let's have a look. I'm just going to boost the kick. I mean, the kick's pretty loud, but it's sounding meaty, it's sounding big. I'm just going to boost this up here a little bit more. But that's sounding good. And this is what I was saying, especially with this sort of genre, you are going to have to push things, I feel, more than you would feel comfortable with maybe in other genres, but it's very specific to this. And as long as you're hearing that that's doing what you want it to do, that's okay. Again, people aren't seeing what's going on behind the scenes. And I feel this is a really good way to kind of achieve that. So we've got this top section good. I'm not going to look at percussion yet. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I just want to see just how at the moment this lot here is sitting together. So let's have a listen. It's sitting nice. I think there's a few things that are quite clearly dominant, but what I'm going to do now is send this kick to a bus. Now, the reason for doing this is because I want to sidechain a lot of this stuff up here and a bit down here as well to the kick. Now, this will just give off the kind of impression that this kick is really dominating the track, which is what he wants. And it does. I mean, I love the sound in my own like beats that I make as well. I love it when you hear that, and some people might not. You know, that's, again, this is kind of subjective, but I really like the sound. And funnily enough, the one I still use is the built-in compressor within Logic. It's a really good compressor. And for sidechains, this is a sidechain I made a little while ago called Hench Sidechain. It's quite an aggressive on the settings. And when I put it to the bus, I'm just going to mute everything bar the kick and what we're going to be sidechained so you can hear what it's doing. This is aggressive, but have a listen. Now, that's reducing quite heavily, so I'm going to take that down a bit on the threshold. Now, the kick's really loud because I've put that to the bus, so I'm just going to take that down just a little bit as well. Forward a little bit more. Yeah, I like that. I think that's kind of working there or thereabouts. Again, if I was doing this for real, I'd be kind of spending a bit more time on all of this, but as we want to kind of get it within the hour, I think let's move on to the next one. And it's going to be the same process again. So I'm going to put the compressor on there, get up sidechain setting and send it to bus 1. And let's have a listen. Okay, so again, it's reducing very heavily, but let's bring that down. And I actually really like that pad. I think it's really missing within the mix itself. So I'm going to give that a little boost on the makeup gain. But yeah, that's sounding kind of there or thereabouts. I think that's sounding right. So let's move on to the vocal. Let's just loop that bit. Get the compressor up. Okay. Now, I actually think you can, with the sidechain, and this is, again, it's a personal preference, but I think you can afford to have quite a heavy reduction on this because I like it when it's of kind of opposite ends of the frequency. So this is the kick in the low end, really affecting the quite high end here. And I like that because I think the kind of the polarization of each frequency really works well and you really hear that kick taking it out. So let's have a listen. Again, I like that. I'm going to take it down a little bit, but have a bit more than the other sections. Okay. Yeah, some nice stereo panning that he's put on that, so that's really cool. Okay, so that's good. Let's have a look at the sub bass now and see how that's working. Now I'm going to do the same thing again on the sub bass, I'm going to bring in the compressor and sidechain it to the kick. You know, some people might not go for that, but you know, I kind of want to go for that. And you know, you could say, well, on the 808, you almost sidechained it by taking out that 64 hertz frequency. Now that you could do that here, but the problem is you can see this is way more constant. This sub bass is kind of, when it's active, it's constant. So you're just going to be stripping back that 64 hertz throughout the whole thing. Whereas in the 808, when the kickback lands, all the rest of that, the transients really poke out. So you're not losing too much there. But I'm going to sidechain this. Let's see how it sounds, because sometimes you can squash it too much. I'm definitely going to have the threshold lower on this, but let's have a listen. Okay, so I'm going to bring that down. But also the compression has added a bit more meat to that sub, which I was feeling sounded a little bit weak. So that's good. It's kind of really reacting well with the sausage fastener, the overdrive there. I think that's really kind of boosted that and made it sound nice. So yeah, that's sitting nice. And then let's just get a section here. Listen back again to just this part, how it's sitting together. Now I think that just listening to that 808, I might just be tempted to take a little bit of this low end out, because I can see that later down the line that is going to be clogging up the system a bit. So let's have a look. No, not too much, but that still sounds big to me, and it's going to allow us to push it a little bit further too. I'm going to take that real sludge out with a heavy low cut as well. I'm kind of cool with that. These levels at the moment, they will be tweaked, but they're there and thereabouts. But that, you can really hear the kind of kick is pushing the side chains nicely, giving a bit of glue to it already. Okay, so let's move on to the kind of percussive parts, because this is going to make up, you know, the other half of the whole track, if you like. So again, the hat, I'm just going to go through exactly as we did with the other ones and just see if there's any sort of raspiness, which can often be in the high-end parts. I'm going to get EQs on here. I'm just going to solo that. Let's chuck this EQ up here. And let's have a listen. So again, it's a really raspy one. And I think I'm going to definitely take a little bit of that out, just soften it a bit. Again, you can come back, push it. It's quite a lot around here as well. I'm just going to see what happens when I take that out. Let's loop that better. You don't want to obviously lose it. You know, don't want to kind of take that away. He wants that stuff to snap, but it can sound a little bit too harsh. So I'm cool with that. Doesn't seem to be anything else dodgy going on there. Let's have a look at the clap. Again, being programmed sort of drums, they're going to sound pretty nice straight off the bat. But if there's something he's put on there that I need to kind of keep an eye on, we'll see it. So let's have a look. Again, it's a really nice sound. There's not anything going too high there that I'm worried about. I think that's absolutely fine. You know, you could have a look at the low end here, but I'm thinking it's not going to be anything that's bothering us. And you want a bit of low end in your snares as well. I mean, this is a clap, so it's going to have less of it, but you want that. Of course, it adds character, but you know, try where you can, strip out what you don't need. All right, let's have a look at the next one, which is the snare. Okay, get the EQ. So this is way more kind of a thicker sort of snare. It's going to, you know, heavier around the mids. You know, that's kind of hitting exactly again where I expect it. I don't want to mess with that too much because again, it's going to be EQ'd before this anyway, before he's even touched it. But let's just listen to the low end, see if there's anything muddy in there. See, that's the real character. That's what you want. There's a little bit down there I could get rid of. Again, it's going to be quite hard for you guys to hear probably through the Zoom audio, but just a little bit down there. It gives more room. Basically, the more you get rid of round here and round here, you're going to have more room for the rest of it to shine nicely. And that snare and that clap, they're going to work together lovely because you've got the high end of the clap and then you've got the kind of mid punch of the snare. So that's cool. Right, let's have a look at this then. So this is the cymbal. Now, the first thing you can hear, I mean, it's a perfectly nice cymbal. It sounds fine. I'm just going to EQ it. But there's something I kind of noticed on there, and it seems like it just cuts off. You can hear it. It just cuts off. There's no sort of tail on it. And, you know, again, that really, it could be intentional. It could be that's what he wants. He wants an abrupt ending, but it sounds weird to me. And I would imagine he's probably used a bit of audio instead of something from some sort of drum machine. And he's plonked it in and maybe just cut it off without realizing, because when you're in the track and you're listening to it, you don't hear these things. And this is why it's so important to break every part down. Let's just see what the EQ is doing on that. So it's quite up there. Let's see it. There's a real bit here. I'm just going to take that out. Let's just see what that sounds like. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to lose a little bit of that. But generally, you know, that's, again, it's where you expect it to be. So let's have a look then. So I'm going to put, and again, this is something you wouldn't really usually do at this stage, but I feel, you know, again, I've worked with this guy for a long time. I kind of know when things like this have happened, what to do. So I'm going to put a bit of reverb on this. Now, this reverb is fantastic. It's in Logic, Space Designer. It's just brilliant. It really is good. And I've tried tons of other reverbs, and this still is my go-to reverb. It's just, there's tons of settings and that do all sorts of things, but there's a really good one that I use called Fine Hall. And yeah, let's have a listen to what that does. So again, it's just ironing out that sort of abrupt ending that I didn't like. Gives it a nice bit of width as well, and maybe softens it as I think will help as well. So yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. I think that's sounding within the realms of where we want it. So let's have a look at the next section. So that's down here. This is a riser. So let's have a listen to that. Okay. Okay, so I mean, he's obviously just put this in for the sort of dramatic effect leading into it. Again, similar to the cymbal, I can hear that he has probably taken a bit of audio and plonked it in and not realized that he's got, you can see here, if I boost the waveform, you can see that it's got real abruptness at the top, and you can hear it straight away. There's like a low end sort of click in there. And a lot of people can just leave these sort of things, but I really feel uncomfortable doing that. So I'm going to get an EQ and just see what that's doing, because it sounds a little bit muddy to me as well. So let's have a look. Yeah, you can see there's like quite a lot of low end there where there's the click in and out of it. And what I'd imagine is he's taken a kind of effect that maybe had like a kick after it initially, and he's chopped it, but left a little bit of that like kick in there as well. So I'm going to do, you know, I'm just going to take that low end straight out. You don't need that. So let's do that. Okay, cool. He's got a bit of that saturation at the top as well. I'm just going to lose that as well. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit further because I really don't like that kind of click at the top. So let me just change these. So I'm going to go in here because you can also see there's no sort of timing to that. He hasn't done it from here. So I'm going to chop it to here, which maybe, no, let's do it there. I don't want to chop too much. Okay, so take that off, put a little fade on it. Sounds just much cleaner, much more tidy. Now, again, you don't necessarily hear all of these things, but this is why you get stuff mixed and mastered, because they hear these tiny little things, and that's the idea. I'm going to chuck a bit of reverb on that again. you know, he might tell me to take that off. He may well do that, and that's fine. You know, he might want that really abrupt thing, and I'm not going to put as much as before, but just a little bit. I like that. Now that sounds nice to me. I think it's going to work really nice, and sometimes that abruptness, again, it's just, it gets in the way a little bit. So I'm just going to make sure, because obviously he's got 1, 2, 3 of those. So I'm just going to apply what I've just done across, because otherwise they'll have that annoying chop in there. So let's do that, and then get rid of what we don't need. Okay, cool. So that's good. Let's have a look now at the open hat. Again, it's doing what it needs to be doing. It's got that nice clarity to it. Let's just make sure it's not going too crazy. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's doing its thing. I'd lose some of this kind of guff at the bottom. You don't want any of that in there. And maybe a little bit at the top as well. It seems to me there's some real extra raspiness there. I'm just going to lose a bit of that, but obviously without losing character. Make that steeper. I think that's cool. Maybe touch there. Okay, cool. I'm happy with that. Now, what's the last one? So again, it's like a reverse open hat, similar to the riser. Let's just loop a little bit on that and have a listen. Okay, let's have a look. Again, this is really being anal, but I can hear a little click in there. I'm just going to go to the EQ and kind of trim this up. And then the other side is as well, is that when you come to, you know, sending your mixes or masters off to somebody else, they've got the patience to do this sort of thing. And you've heard your track so many times. The idea of doing this sort of laborious stuff is just, she just puts you off. You don't want to do that. So there is massive advantages to someone doing this for you, because it's just really tidying it up. Okay, so I'm gonna just take out that little bit of low end. It's really going quite high there. So I'm gonna just take that down as well. And like I say, you'll hear later that the high end does get boosted and comes out. So be very careful with how raspy you do have your stuff, okay? So that's kind of everything there. I'm kind of happy with that. I mean, again, I would probably go through and clip it as I have done with these and then apply that across. But for time's sake, that's not too bad. I'm kind of happy with that. What I might do is just chuck a little bit of reverb on there, actually, just a tiny bit. Just the fine hall setting again. Okay. Yeah, nice. All right. So let's have a listen now. Everything kind of in a decent enough place. Let's see how it's kind of all sitting together. Okay, so they're sitting together pretty nice. I'm just going to listen back to the reference and just hear kind of how that's working, because again, we need to remember the bits that need to bang. Now don't worry, it's going to be louder because this is a master and what we're in is the mix, so it's going to be louder, but just in terms of where snares sit and kicks. Okay. Cool, so that's given me a little good idea. Again, at this stage, I would definitely kind of take at least a tea break and then come back and listen with fresh ears. And again, I would never mix and master something in one day. I'd always at least give it a day to go back with fresh ears and hear things. And it is important to do that. And again, I've done this all on headphones. I would never do that. But this is more just the process of how I attack things, if you like. But let's have a little listen here. And then what I'm going to do is just bring up my mixer now and kind of like a mixing desk. I'm just going to kind of like go through and tweak little bits and bobs where I feel need to be brought out or lowered, but let's have a listen. So I think the snare, that can probably come up a little bit. It's quite loud in the last track. Yeah, just make sure your levels over here are doing what they should. I'm going to chuck a little bit of a limiter on that snare as well, just so we can kind of hear it, but let it not dominate too much. Let's have a listen with that in there. You can see it's freed up some nice room there as well. Yeah, that kind of sound that works for me. Okay. So the other thing I want to do as well, and this is something that's kind of a personal preference, but really good with kind of trap tracks as well, is I like sidechaining the hi-hat to the kick. It just, again, gives it that sort of real heavy dominance and lets it shine nicely. So let's have a little listen to that. Just gives it that lovely swing. Give it a little bit of makeup. Okay, that's kind of sounding in a good level. I think the sample could come down a bit. Sub bass is pretty loud too. And also, like with here, the transitions are important because you go from a sub bass into an 808, which is a bass, and you want those not to kind of be completely different to each other. Looking here, I just feel maybe I've gone a bit OTT with certain strip backs on here. I'm just going to take these out and have a listen. This is on the 808. Yeah. So you've still got that space there where the kick's living, but I maybe had just gone a bit too extreme on this end. And again, when we go into the next part, which is the actual mastering of this mix, I can take that stuff out. Again, I can affect that. So yeah, I think that sounded nice. And again, the 808 was the real focus he wanted to look at. But yeah, that's sounding nice. I think we're hitting the things that he wanted. Just make sure that that nice pad is sitting there. Right. I'll bring that out. Yeah. Again, it's more prominent here because it's a more stripped back section, so you have to be careful. But I like it. I think it sounds really nice. Cymbals pretty loud. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Open out's alright. Let's listen to this riser and that. Bring that down a little bit. What about this one? That's nice, it sits really nice. I really like the reverb on the cymbal now. I think that definitely made a difference. Just gives it, I could hear that abruptness and I just didn't like it. But you know, roughly there or thereabouts, we're sounding within the realms. Let's just have a little listen in from the top. again, I'd be listening to this a lot more. And again, I've only focused on this section here. I know that this track is a loop essentially, but you know, you would of course look at the whole track if you were doing this for somebody else or even for yourselves, because there might be a breakdown, the note of the sub might change, or the 808. So of course I would be listening to the whole thing, but for time's sake, I've just kind of focused on this, which has the kind of main two sections. So what I'm going to do now, and not everybody does this, but I'm going to just have a look at the master output on here. Now I'm going to put an EQ in. I probably won't touch it, but the reason I'm doing it, I just want to see what the overall track is doing, and if there's something that's jumping out that I don't like the look of. And the other one I'm going to put in here is a compressor. Now again, some people might not do this, but I like to do it. And this one is called the Glue. It's from Cytomic. It's a really good compressor, and essentially it does what it says on the tin. It glues the whole thing together, and I really like it. I think it gives that effect to tracks, and it also obviously creates headroom that then we take into the next part to make us push it a little bit further. So with those two in mind, the other one I'm going to put on is a match EQ, which is the standard within Logic. And all it does is basically analyze the signals. So I'm going to just push this a little bit first on the threshold. You can see that it's producing up here. Now again, you don't want to go up here, it's just going to sound horribly squashed. Yeah, around 4 to, I think 4 to 6 is my sort of number, but there's no right or wrong with that. What you feel sounds nice. And of course you can see down here that it's created some headroom. But let's see, use the makeup gain a little bit. Let's see what this EQ is doing. Okay. Now, you know, for typical tracks like this, you would see this sort of wavelength where it starts quite high up here and then kind of slowly goes down here. That is quite common with a lot of tracks that I work on. And you know, there's nothing that's kind of jutting out to me. There's nothing that's maybe something around this region here, which I'd imagine is within the sample. So we can always take a little look at that. Let's just get the EQ up with that. Yeah, I'd imagine it's this one here. Okay, but generally I'm kind of happy with where that is at the moment. And yeah, again, like I say many times, I would listen to this way more and on all different formats and speakers and cans and all the rest of it. But just to show you kind of what I would do, and we're in a good place. I'm kind of happy with that, you know. So let's just highlight this. I'm just going to make sure there's no sort of weird sort of tails at the end, because sometimes it can just tail off and then just stop, and you know the audio cuts. They don't want that. So let's have a listen. Okay, so yeah, he's just got a nice kind of delay and reverb on there. He's happy with that. So let's bounce this out. Now, again, I would always recommend listening in real time, because every now and then you might get a glitch that it happens when you're doing offline bounces. Real time, you know, ensures that you don't get any glitches at all. In terms of settings, 44, 48 for TV, but that's irrelevant. And then resolution, just do as high as possible, 24-bit. It's going to take up more space on your hard drive, but the quality is better. So, you know, WAV, AIF, whatever you like really, but these, you know, as long as it's 24-bit. So let's just run this off. I'm just going to chuck this on the desktop. Okay. Right, so that's going off. And so what we're going to do next is actually go into another session. Now, a lot of mixing and mastering is often not just one track. You're not just doing one track, you'll be doing an album. So you would have multiple of this session, but obviously different tracks. So you would all get them to this sort of stage where you're happy with where the mix is sounding. Then you would obviously all take them into a mastering session so that it's all, you know, all the bounces as individuals, files, all on top of each other, because you're going to be constantly comparing levels and making sure that there's continuity throughout the entire album. So let's get rid of this and open up the master. Okay, so again, like I say, you'd usually have multiple tracks with all the different tracks that you're going to be mastering for that person's project, right? So let me just get rid of those. So I'm just going to bring in the one we've just done. Okay. Okay. So this is there, and I've got the reference track here. So let's have just a little listen to that again to refresh. The 808. So this is what we're looking to get to essentially. So what I would do here is chuck an EQ on straight away at the top. Put that up there. And then after that, I'm going to put the Fab Filter limiter on. And again, I'm going to use the match EQ. You know, again, this does analyze it. Of course it does. But there's something about the match EQ. I've used it for so many years. I just like it. It's just like an old friend to me. So I'm going to put that in there as well. Now, what I want to do is try and keep all these windows open. Let's unmute that. Get a section that we want to look at. And then let's just have a listen. Now what I'm going to do is boost this quite high. It's going to be reducing really heavily, but the reason I'm doing that is to kind of put it up to where it's really squashing it, and then run it through the match EQ, and it will show us better where the kind of the mess is. All right, let's do it. So a heavy reduction there. That's okay. That's not how it's going to come out. But let's have a listen. So again, I'm actually quite happy with where that's sitting. The bass is too loud. It's just does need to be brought down a bit. And then the 808, you can really hear that's thumping heavily. So like I mentioned earlier, I can take this part out now. You don't have to do it in the mix. Okay, so let's just strip that out. Let's listen to the 808 section. Okay, so now I can bring this down because we don't need it to be pushed that high. But let's have a listen back to the other track. 808. Okay, and then listen back to ours. So volume-wise, it's probably a little bit louder. Let's listen to the 808. I mean, potentially you could boost a little bit of high end here. Just to crisp it up, but be very careful of making it too raspy, but that's small. But that's a nice healthier reduction, and you can literally see what it's reducing. So, you know, we're there or thereabouts. Let's have another listen back to this. Maybe boost that a little bit louder. Okay. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, that is sounding, you know, there or thereabouts. Now again, don't ever be afraid. If you're hearing stuff at this level, go back into the mix. By all means, go back into that mix. If you're hearing something that you're not comfortable with, I do it so many times. I've gone back and done version 8 of a mix because there's something that I hear at this level, because of course, you're boosting it quite a lot with the limiter. So it's gonna be bringing out multiple frequencies that you might be uncomfortable with. So by all means, go back in. But roughly, this is kind of there or thereabouts. And again, I have to say, I would always take way more time with this. I can always do it on different speakers, headphones, but I just wanted to show you guys kind of how I go about it and what I do and how, you know, my sort of methods, and hopefully you guys can kind of take it away and apply some of what I've showed you to your tracks. But yeah, that's kind of it, guys. And if there's any sort of questions you have, please feel free to ask me. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something.
Jack, you're a pro, man. That was exactly 1 hour. That was exactly 1 hour.
Really? That's amazing. That is actually amazing.
That's pretty impressive, man.
Well, these engineers, you have to really be watching the clock, man. That is the truth. When you've got a client breathing down your neck in the studio, you got to be on it, mate. So.
So thank you very much for that. I mean, that's